All right, we'll call the April 19th, 2023 Policy and Academics Committee meeting to order. First order is roll call.
Dr. Guion?
Here.
Ms. Bourgeois?
Here.
And Ms. Wells?
Here.
Section 2, Policy and Procedure, Proposed Policy Revisions. The new policy, first policy up is to approve revisions to policy IDFAA, drug screening of student athletes, as presented by Mr. Delk.
Okay, so this policy has been in effect since the summer of 2013 to begin in the school year of 2013-2014, so just about coming up on 10 years this policy's been in place. After Hurricane Ida, I think most of you already know, after Hurricane Ida, we lost our drug testing company that we had been using for a very long time. They just went out of business. They got hit real hard with the hurricane and decided not to come back. So that left us without a company to enact this policy for the remainder of that school year. So Ms. Tobias put out an RFP, and we ended up with a new company for drug testing. Through that process, it made us take a really hard look at the policies as we were onboarding that company. Through that, we decided that there were definitely some changes and some updates that needed to be made. So with the help of our athletic directors in middle and both high school, our principals at both of those levels who are at schools that are affected by this policy, Mr. Martin, as well as Mr. Ahmadi's office, has discussed and reviewed the changes to this policy. This policy is 6 pages long. I apologize. I'm going to try to hit the highlights, and if I'm going too fast or too slow, please let me know. So we'll go page by page, highlighting the changes. On the first page of the policy, there's nothing here that changes the content. These are all just cleaning up language on page 1. So nothing really there to discuss. And again, please stop me and interrupt me if you have any questions. When we get to page 2, within that first paragraph, many times throughout this policy, you see the student referred to as the student. Sometimes they were referred to as the athlete. Sometimes they were referred to as a student athlete. So we just clean that up. So everywhere in this policy, you're going to see student athlete. So that's going to be a change throughout. In the third paragraph, well, actually, it's the second paragraph. We have a change that, trying to get my bearing straight here, okay? We have a couple of changes in that second paragraph. Again, we changed the superintendent or designee as the language used throughout. Here, we eliminate athletic director, principal, head coach, because those individuals do not have anything to do with directing the dates or the frequency of the testing. That's only going to be the superintendent, or in most cases, me as that designee. Moving on from there, at the end of the first paragraph, refusal by the parent or guardian or the student athlete to allow testing shall constitute immediate notice that they may not participate in athletics. That was just cleaning up a little bit, but I feel like that's a very important statement. If they don't want to participate in our drug testing policy, then they cannot participate in athletics in our parish. At the very bottom of the second page comes the first real substantive change. You see, we're proposing to take out a large chunk of a paragraph. That paragraph describes the frequency of random testing and also how random testing is arrived at. Okay? It discusses a pool with the representative of the company and members of the school system, they are actually drawing names and numbers to choose random students to be tested. That actually hasn't occurred in a very long time. And the company that we're using is actually a company out of Florida. So it's just impossible that we're going to be in the same room with those people. So we're changing that language, which moves to the beginning of page 3, that just says that the superintendent or his designee shall determine a method of random selection of student athletes to be tested. So in the example of that we're currently using, we submit the student ID numbers to the company. Like if we know that basketball is going to be the next group to be randomly tested, we submit those student IDs to the company. They have a computer program specifically designed to randomly pick people out of that pool. So that is a better description of how that actually occurs. If we have a different company running drug testing, I imagine they may have a different policy. So just to say that it definitely has to be a process that we approve of, that we feel is fair to randomly select students, so that we're not, handpicking who we think needs to be tested. So that takes us on to page 3. Down to the middle of page 3, there's a minor change here. The old policy just had this NIDA listed with no explanation of what that meant or what it was. So we did a little research. We talked to our drug testing company, and then we added to that another organization. And these organizations just give guidance to procedures of companies that actually drug test people. So it's like their body that they get information from how to do this properly. So we just clarified that. And then right underneath that is something that needs to be noted. The policy referred to testing for anabolic steroids. From the time that this policy got enacted, there was never any testing for steroids. So that is just an incorrect statement. The major prohibiting factor with testing for anabolic steroids is that the test that we use currently for the 5-panel, which is described here, is roughly $50 per student. To test for anabolic steroids would be $230 per test. That would make this cost prohibitive. This would, obviously way more than double the cost of our program that we would not be able to fund. Currently, just for your information, we've spent about $50,000 so far on drug testing for this school year, with one more, I think, billing cycle left to go. So maybe about $60,000 will be the total. If we were testing anabolic steroids, it would be, $200,000-300,000 for this. That's the recommended change there. And then at the very bottom of that page, moving into 4th page, there's basically a risk statement about why these are the drugs that are being tested for. Mr. Ahmadi made some amendments to that statement just to clarify it and I think make it a better statement. As we move on to page 4, where we see the heading results of the test, we're removing that paragraph that talks about samples for testing by the lab shall only be identified by assigned numbers. Well, in the world of drug testing, this chain of custody form is what is used that the patient, I guess you would say, the person being tested has to fill out upon them being tested. They have to put their name on that form. So immediately that statement needs to be corrected. And I will tell you that what it looks like is the student fills out that form, submits their sample, hands that directly to the drug testing company. They're the only person that see that form with the student's name on it. The next person to see that form is my office. It does not touch the hands of a coach, of an athletic director. It doesn't roll around the front office of the school. Straight from the drug company to my office. we verify it, we go through our processes, especially in the case if it's a positive. But we feel like it absolutely has to have the kid's name on it so that there's no question about who this is that we're talking about. So that's a change there. There's a slight change about mailing results. We're just going to say they're submitting results because at this point we're not mailing anything. We're putting that through emails that are encrypted. Everything else moving down is more cosmetic until you get towards the bottom of that page. When a student tests positive, the student has two options. So we're fixing some language within those two options. If a student tests positive, under the recommended changes, that student will be ineligible for the remainder of that season. So under the old policy, if a student tested positive in football season in week 2, it was theoretically possible that that kid could come back and continue to participate in that same sport. That was a change that Mr. Martin recommended. He felt like test positive for drugs in that sport, you shouldn't go back to that same sport at a minimum. So within that first option, previously the policy called for a 6-week educational assistance program. And it said 6 weeks, nothing else. It didn't give any other flexibility or options there. So we wanted to change that to say a minimum 6 weeks. What we found is different agencies throughout the parish and in other parishes, they offer drug rehabilitation programs, counseling. It may or may not last 6 weeks. So we felt like we set it at a minimum of 6 weeks, and if it goes longer, then great, even better. There was also a component of this that talked about 6 negative drug tests for 6 consecutive weeks. Well, if you know how much it costs to go get a drug test at urgent care or somewhere like that, a single parent, that could get very cost prohibitive. And we also found that some of these agencies that are doing drug rehabilitation, they have components of random drug testing in their own program. So we opened up for a little bit of flexibility there. So one, give the agency conducting the rehabilitation some options, but also two, to make sure that we're not pricing families out of this as an option, because if a student chooses not to participate in this option 2 is a very stiff penalty, which is at the bottom of the 4th page into the 5th page. So we clarified some of that policy, some of the wording of that with option 2. So if the student says, or the parent says, we're not doing your drug program, your 6-week whatever program, we're just not going to do athletics anymore. So at that point, that student is immediately suspended from athletics for the remainder of that school year. And then through the following school year to that sport where the positive test occurred. So if you tested positive in basketball and you don't go through the program, you're suspended for the rest of that school year and then through the next basketball season, if that's what the parent chooses to do. So we're clarifying some of those statements there. Now we're on page 5. In the middle of page 5, we're moving a paragraph. This paragraph about a student athlete refusing to test was tucked in to the paragraph about a second offense, which didn't really make a lot of sense to me. So we moved that up and we changed some wording just a little bit because we wanted to give a little bit of flexibility to the school. If the student refuses to take the drug test, then the recommended change in the policy would be that we would call the parent. Give that parent an opportunity to talk to their students, to counsel them, before we just say, bam, you're ineligible. Some of these kids are young. Sometimes they get a little bit gun shy about taking the test. So we wanted the parents to have an opportunity to counsel with their student before we just immediately made a ruling that they were ineligible. So that's trying to reflect a little bit of flexibility to bring that parent in a situation like that. Okay? And then as we move on to the final page, we're just removing this statement. There was a statement in here about the 6-week assistance program offered by the school system. Well, this is not something that the school system actually does. Our school guidance counselors are not drug counselors, and they were never intended to be. So we're just removing that verbiage from that policy. And that is everything.
All right. So let's go ahead and I get a motion to accept the revision. Okay, so Ms. Wells and Ms. Bourgeois. All right. Public discussion? Any public discussion? Yes, sir. Please come up and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is John Toops at 207 Ramsey Drive here in Thibodeau. And you're calling for public comment before we get to hear the board comments. I would prefer your agenda to let me hear the voice of the experienced people and their judgment in terms of their consideration of policy, or I can render what I'm hearing in the event that I haven't fully comprehended from the agenda. Is that something the board could consider in the future in the way that you ask for public comments? I don't know if it was done that way in the past, but it would give us a better insight as to the leadership thinking of the school board, and so that we, the citizens who are less informed, could be more informed in terms of your opinions to help us shape some thoughts that we might not have recognized. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I can submit it to the board for consideration.
Yeah, so I think you've established it, and we can have a discussion about it, and I'm sure at some point we'll have an answer as to if the present practice meets our public participation throughout the state, and we'll get an opinion on that.
So there's nothing more I need to do to bring it to the full board?
No, I think we have enough people that have witnessed your suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, school board member comment? Ms. Wells?
I just had a question. The 5 to 15%, do they go per school, or is it like, do they pull from the entire district at one time?
Per team.
Per team, okay.
We have a calendar that the high schools have total team tests at the beginning of their seasons. We test the whole team. And then we have randoms, as per the policy, at least once per month during that time frame. Middle school is all randoms. So it's based on the size of each team. So we go within that percentage for every single team. So we will list, these are the tests that are going to occur in the next window. And when we send that information out to the drug testing company, we give them the most up-to-date roster, because those things change.
Yeah.
And then we give them that kind of range of and then we let their computer.
Right, so if you
its
say
thing.
South's football team, you send them South's football team, and then they pick from South's football team.
5 to 15% of that football team. Then they'll go to Thibodeau High and do their football team. 5 to 15%.
Mr. Wright?
I had two questions. First question, is it illegal or legal for a student athlete to take steroids?
Is it? Yeah, it would absolutely be illegal.
Yeah, I don't understand why we don't test for that. We don't test for the other drugs. I know the cost may be expensive, but you might have a student athlete that might be just addicted to steroids and to marijuana, cocaine. I don't understand why we're leaving that one out. I know it's very expensive, but I think our whole goal should be to save all student athletes from doing all drugs, not just to base it on funding. And my second question would be, what if we have a student athlete that is on medical marijuana? How would that work?
Well, to my knowledge, that hasn't happened yet. But I'll give you a similar example with a different drug.
And I'm only saying it because
Yeah,
people are gonna look for loopholes
yeah.
to get around things.
So the drug that gets positive more than any other drug, all the rest of them combined actually, is amphetamines. And it's almost always an ADHD medicine. So what that looks like is we'll get the results from the drug company. They'll just give us a list of positives, and positive for what? We'll reach out back to the school, and almost in 9 out of 10, the parent already knows. I'll hear it frequently. Yeah, y'all get my kid every year. I mean, here's the prescription from the doctor for his ADHD medicine. That's why he's getting positive on the amphetamine. Once we verify that that's a current prescription from a doctor, then we have a document that everybody signs off on, the parent, the student, the principal, and then finally myself, to clear that student. So regardless of what the particular drug may be, if that person is legally prescribed a medication, that is how we would respond to that, to clear them.
Ms. Malden?
Okay.
The assistant part of that, you're talking about, that's for them to like do counseling and all, right? Okay, so my question becomes this. What about the socioeconomic impacted parent that can't afford to do the drug testing? Are they being able to go to Walmart and just buy the one over the counter? Or are they gonna have to go back through the school's drug testing facility, which could cost them, like you were saying, an X amount of money? And if they don't have that money, then the child's gonna be punished for something that the parents can't afford.
Which is what we don't want to happen. So we have a working list of different agencies that provide that service. We provide that to the schools to offer to a parent in that situation. We had one this year that occurred in that exact scenario, and they found a provider that offered free, and that extended to the random tests as well. So that student went through the program, conducted those random tests through that same agency at no cost to the student. He completed it. He fulfilled all the requirements. He was clean for all his randoms. They presented the certificate back to the principal. The principal verified it, sent it into my office with the documentation that he had completed that. And on that first offense, after that season, and we've taken that corrective action, he can now resume participation in athletics. Now, of course, if it would be a second offense, the penalties escalate. But we definitely want to make this an affordable option for all families. I don't want just the rich kids to be able to access the. Absolutely. Yes.
Val?
That's what I wanted to say. Thank you guys for really looking through this policy. It is, to me, it seems like you took, like you said, the single parent in mind, but it's also stringent enough that the athletes need to really think about what they're doing.
We've worked on this since August. We've been working on this to make sure we get it right.
Any other board discussion? All right, since none, we'll go ahead and vote. All right, and motion passes. Next is B, to accept revisions to policy BBC board committees. And in this instance, we have two options placed in front of the board. One option is by Ms. Jamie Marlborough, and the second option is from Ms. Tina Babin. At this time, what I would like to do is have the discussion and then accept the motion for either option 1 or option 2 in that process. So, if each of you would like to do an introduction of your revisions, feel free to do that. We'll let you go first. Walter.
I just want to read a statement, and then if you'd like, you can just rewind it and make it easier to know. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. First, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and Dr. Dia, I am sorry that I fussed you the other night, and I'm really sorry. There are a few things that come to mind with the policies that are on the agenda tonight. At the last board meeting, I argued that I had a huge issue with the fact that policy BCBD added 2 committees, the Executive Standing Committee and the Executive Ad Hoc Committee, to determine if elected board members could place jurisdictional items on the agenda. There was no establishment, no details or definition of an Executive Ad Hoc Committee. There also at this time is no standing committee called Executive Committee. If the thought process was the word executive restricted the committee to only board members, there was confusion. That's where the confusion came in, and policy BBC needed to be changed first to reflect the changes made to policy BCBD. So that's where I understood. What I've learned in the last few months as a board member, the mindset among many people, whether it's in the community, in this room, is that the board is about the collective whole and not individualism of each district. Even scarier, with policy BCBD, the censorship of elected officials has me fearing we are going down the socialism road that will only lead us to a communistic dictatorship. Tonight's policies, some in my opinion, are further the silencing of board members and the public. Others are a compromise of what was passed in the last school board meeting. One of tonight's agenda items is BCBD. Currently, this policy, in my opinion, can make it where bills that are in our state legislature or federal government that can or will be impacting education or by executive order of the governor or the president will not be allowed to be discussed despite the receiving of funding from both of these levels of government that in turn have a huge impact and say in how this school district operates. With the current policy, this can occur because it is not an actionable item. Anything that is not an actionable item, in my opinion, can be classified as better served by dissemination of the information to the board outside of the meeting. This basically, folks, is potentially making it where board members and the public can only bring items for a vote. So get crafty with y'all requests. Dictatorship, by definition, is a form of government in which one person or a small group possesses absolute power without effective constitutional limitations. Communism, by definition, is the communist state that is the dictatorship of the working class, where the advanced elements of the working class are the ruling class. In Marxist-Leninist thinking, the socialist state is the last repressive state, since the next stage of development is that of pure communism, a classless and stateless society. The multiple choices up for a vote tonight are both a form of dictatorship. In choice 1, a committee of only 3 people would decide what can be on the agenda and ultimately what is placed on the agenda. The saving grace in option 1 is that it gives the elected board members the power to bring agenda items that are representative of their district and gives the district a voice. This allows democracy to flow. Also, there is accountability in option 1. The board members are all to serve at one time or another on the Executive Ad Hoc Committee. This allows the stakeholder to put the accountability on all board members when it comes to the freedom of speech. Option 1 also makes sure that if people are denied to get on the agenda, they get a reason in writing of why they were denied. Again, brings accountability. And choice 2 is revised policy BBC up for vote tonight. The advisory committee is a standing committee made up of the president, the vice president, and only one board member elected by the board. They will serve for a whole year. Choice 2, in my opinion, is an ultimate dictatorship because option 2's policy, BBC, states that the advisory committee is made up of the 3 people and one being the president. The key is because in option 2 of BBC, the board president gets to approve or deny committee reports, which are the recommendations that come out of committee. This is creating an ultimate dictatorship because the president will have a say on the advisory committee and will be the only person who in the end will have a say that what gets on the agenda. In my opinion, this means that if you make it out of committee, the board president has the authority to deny your request. Many people say this is a business meeting, but I don't know about you. This is the only business that has our children more waking hours than we do as parents.
We have no say at all now. We've been silenced where law allows a general comment period at school board meetings, subjected to a communistic dictatorship censorship style committee to be heard, and again potentially being denied by the president if option 2's policies BCBD passes. This allows for elected officials to be silenced or censored and not able to represent their district thoroughly. The state statute 42:15 school board meetings and public comment states, A, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, each school board, subject to the provisions of this chapter, except as provided in subsection B of this section, shall allow public comment at any meeting of the school board prior to taking any vote. The comment period shall be for each agenda item and shall precede each agenda item. The Orleans Parish, and letter B, Orleans Parish School Board at any meeting of the school board shall provide an opportunity for public comment subject to reasonable rules, regulations, restrictions as adopted by the school board. And letter C, for purposes of this section, a comment period for all comments at the beginning of the meeting shall not suffice to meet the requirements of subsection A or subsection B of this committee, meaning we can have open comment at the beginning. It's the district that's stopping it. The title of BCBI in board docs is public participation. Option 2 clearly is removing how the public is to get on the agenda in BCBI and is hiding how the public gets on the agenda in policy BCBD, which is titled Agenda Preparation and Dissemination. Most of the public will go to the public participation to see how to get on the agenda, and most will not read the board's policies in their entirety, leaving them thinking they are not allowed to speak on the agenda. Option 2 is still subjecting parents, the grandparents, taxpayers, and stakeholders to a dictatorship that ends in communism. It too, like option 1, subjects the people of this community to a committee of 3 people that may not be from their district, that do not know the challenges that community is facing in their district, nor what that district feels or believes. The advisory committee and the board president in option 2, in my opinion, have the power to censor and silence the people's voice. BCBI refers back to BCBD and does not allow board members to place what they want on the agenda, like option 1. Option 1 does not touch policy BCBI. Recently, it was brought to my attention that a guest speaker at a local high school was wearing a shirt that said the art of Ubuntu. I did not know what that meant, so I Googled that, and basically it supports collectivism over individualism. The socialist view of democracy is therefore built around a collectivist conception rather than individualism, and that is the definition of socialism, and it sounds the same to me. What angers me about this is that I asked as a board member to watch what the students were presented. There is no video and no audio recording. Most importantly, there was no outline submitted prior to the speaker speaking, and the speaker was allowed to wear a shirt that some may say promoted socialism. That is what is allowed for people to walk into our schools and mold the minds of our children, but parents and elected officials on this board are potentially subjected to a dictatorship-style committee that will demand to see our outlines, materials, or what we will be presented, and will determine if the parents or board member can be heard. Please understand that I do not know what parents or what was talked about with our students because there's no proof of that they were told during instructional time. I've been told by constituents, according to their children, it was a great experience, but again, no way to prove it. The point is, I as an elected official and all elected officials that serve on this board, as well as parents, will be required to be approved by a committee of 3 in option 1 and 2, just so parents can be heard and elected board members can represent their own individual district's views, and we all will potentially be subjected to potential censorship or silencing, not only by the executive ad hoc committee in option 1 or advisory committee and the president in option 2, and that is not democracy. Parents that cannot afford to send their children to private school, parents that are not cut out to be homeschool teachers, their only option is the public school system. Parents that do not have options are forced by the government to send their children to public school, and now the God-given right for them to be heard or have a say is potentially being blocked or censored by a dictatorship-style committee, and in the end, the ultimate dictator. Their elected officials are now potentially being censored and cannot represent their constituents' voices with the passing of option 2's policies. I put a policy up, but after reading the current policies in place for the public, the board members, and what is being proposed in option 2, I'm pulling my policy proposal because it was a give and take, and I was giving more than the people could have got in return. If option 2's policies pass, there will be the need for the policy changes to be of a democracy and not socialistic or of a communistic dictatorship. The previous board had the foresight to leave the safety net of allowing board members to place agenda items on the agenda. This allows democracy to flow. It allows for the freedom of speech. It stopped the board from becoming a socialistic dictatorship going into communism. Someone would say to me, Jamie, they will sneak it in. It is coming, but not in these exact words. And I'm very, very sorry I did not heed your warning. Because you were right. This is not American. This is not the way of the Constitution or representative of our conservative district. This is not bridging the gap, but causing further division, and we can do better. Democracy and the freedom of speech are the constitutional rights that this country was founded on and should not die with this board's policies. The right to speak freely without restraint is essential to democratic government because it helps us develop better laws, policy through challenge, rebuttal, and debate. I would like to close with these words. Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy. Elon Musk. You can please remove my policy.
Okay. Let the record reflect that Ms. Marlborough has removed her policy recommendation or suggestion, which is option 1. Ms. Batley, would you like to do an introduction for
Yes.
your option 2?
So I'm looking at option 2, and if you did happen to evaluate, read through, and look at it, you'll see that what we're asking is to go ahead and set up an advisory committee. Historically, this board has run with an advisory committee that sat with 5 board members. At this point, we all understand that with a board of only 9, 5 board members would consist of a quorum, and therefore we cannot have that. So what we're doing is we're presenting the revision of the advisory committee with that for the 9-member board. With that being said, every person on the advisory committee would be voted in by the actual entire board. The president, who is elected by the board, the vice president, who is elected by the board, and 1 member at large that also would be elected by the board. What would happen is, to take the confusion and the revolving door of an advisory committee, we would set that up to serve for the term of the president, which would be established each January. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions. You were provided this in advance. If you look down at the end of the policy, it goes ahead and it goes through all the responsibilities. It's very well written, I find. We work together as a team. I am presenting this as our option. If you have questions, we'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you. So, and I was going to go ahead and just open it up and leave option 1 open for comment. Because it was still proposed, even though it's been pulled. I think it's only fair. And so we'll do public comments. And Mr. Ron, I believe you have now. I want to ask you, do you want to do each one separately? Because you did put in a card to address all 3. Did you want to do them separately, or did you want to do them just at one time? I'm asking.
Ron Sapi, 110 Bourgeois Street, Racine, Louisiana. Mr. Chairman, I can do them either way.
Okay, I really leave it up to you.
I can come up here and talk as y'all pick up each policy.
Okay.
And right now, if you want me to address both policies, I can do that as well.
Yeah, why don't you do that? I think it's probably the cleanest way to do it. So please, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I just think and agree with Ms. Marlborough in some ways. I just have this feeling that I don't like a committee to be able to prevent anyone, when I mean anyone, I'm talking about the superintendent, board member, a member of the public, from speaking on the agenda. Ms. Marlborough cited Louisiana Revised Statute 42:15. Does not say anywhere in the statute that you cannot have an open public to address the board, period. So those are my feelings, and they apply to both policies. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Yes, sir. Please come on up and do likewise.
John Toops, 207 Ryanzy Drive. I'm new to coming to board meetings and understanding what this country needs now with school boards. There's such a pressure of understanding about indoctrination as opposed to teaching and all the commentary around that there is an openness to speak, that the public can be heard, that democracy is a channel for the voice of the people to be heard. So I don't understand the needs for the change from in December, then a proposed change, and now a committee for a year. My thought is that if you have a committee, and they're appointed by the school board, I would prefer to see it rotate every 6 months as opposed to locking in for a year. That's my comment on that part. And then how does it fit into the next part? Who really controls the agenda and supervises that agenda? So, you know, that part has some understanding that if it's killed in the committee, there is a chance for it to be brought back up. Correct, as I understand it. So the only comment I have, and this is as you said, Mr. Chairman, in our first meeting when we met, that this is an open work in progress. So we will try it and we'll see how it works. But you are the voice of the people. If the federal government, the state government, or anybody else influences the education of our children and the voice of our parents and our teachers and our students, you're the voice. If we can't speak to you, who do we speak to? You're our local representative, and to silence that voice, I don't know if you're intending to do that, but it goes into review whether you see it or not. But let me assure you that the public is not going to stand or being silenced about the impact of its children. In the governor's race, the people running for office state the number one, number two is the school system. And they state statistics. And so they're all driving and focusing on this, which everybody's here and got elected to do a good job. But everybody's nervous, to be honest. What's going on in the world and how do we fit? That's why I'm here. I don't have any grandchildren in the game. I got great-grandchildren, and I'm very concerned about the South Louisiana culture. I grew up in Lockport, went to Catholic school, private and public school, and that the society I lived in is not there, and why not? You can all say it's, and I've done it. I've met the DA, I've met judges, I've met in trying to figure out what's going on in our society, and there's not a lot of control that you can have at some point. But at least you can be the voice of the people where we can come and you can hear that voice and help us react. We have to have some adults in the room saying, you know, and there's something in the 15th century where the people formed democracy, where the leadership controlled the few and they decided we will not be controlled. And that revolution of thinking formed our United States. So that the purpose is you can only govern, and I don't want to get off in a rhetoric, but so you need to have a voice, and everybody's concerned, and everybody's going to start watching, because certain things are coming down the pike with, you know, Title IX and the new legislature, and they got 20 bills, and what they're going to do. So all I'm asking is that we will watch this closely. I would suggest that the committee rotates so that no one person feels like they got locked out. Other than that, let the system work, and we'll see if we like it or not.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please. As everyone else, please state your name and address.
Gail Navarre, 408 Community Drive in Thibodeau. And I've listened to Jamie, and I'm not sure, Ms. Baldwin, I'm not sure I understand why she took her option off the table. We really understand that. But I think Jamie's thinking is like, let's really give this a lot of thought. And I got to tell you, Gwen, thank you today. Gwen and I talked on the phone, helped me go through the board doc and all that to find the information. It is really next to impossible. I asked one of the ladies tonight, I said, you got to see it? No, I never could find it. I said, okay, I'll find it. It took me 10 minutes to find it again. So it's just not accessible. I mean, it's like we want parents and grandparents and the public to be involved, but you guys got to make it easy enough for us that we understand it. And I mean, you know, I asked Graham, I said, where can we get the policies? We talked about that. We changed a few things and everything. So what we did the other day when we submitted a request to speak, we did it incorrectly. So where is it written what's to be done? I don't know. So I just said, make it more accessible, make it more transparent, give the public a chance to be in there. Then people won't be suspicious about what's going on. Okay, that's basically it. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Right? Yes, come on down.
Hi.
You were holding back until the end. Likewise, please.
Shiana Heritage, 466 Crossing North Street, Thibodeau. I don't completely understand. I listened, I read, but I don't completely understand. What I do understand is what I see happening farther away from us, meaning in the United States, is the socialistic path. And it does concern me that it can head this way. And so I did appreciate what you said, Ms. Marlborough, because I know that someone on the board has eyes open to that. And I'm not saying other people don't. I'm just saying that I appreciate that other people are looking at that, because I get worried about, and if we can't have a voice, it's, we all know it. You know, we have our kids, you've got our kids. And so if we do go down that path, it concerns me. So I don't understand, and I wish I could talk, be more specific about what's being presented. But I did appreciate knowing that somebody's looking at it from that vantage point. So thank you.
Anyone else? All right, board discussion? Yes. Come on down, Ms. Buffy.
I made a couple of notes so that I can speak eloquently. So.
Yes, and you're welcome to sit up at the chair, at the seat, so that way everyone can
So
hear.
everyone can hear me and see me. So I just wanted to speak to something that I believe Mr. Toop said. When I was elected and we were all elected, we took an oath to represent the people who elected us and to be their voice. And I accepted that responsibility when I took that oath among you all, and I take it seriously every day. I take calls from people often, and I am following up. And I feel like that was a big piece of what was missing, with maybe people feeling like they weren't being heard and just not getting follow-up and resolution to their issues. So I made that a commitment to myself and to the people that I represent, that when I was contacted by a constituent, be it a parent or someone else within my district, that I would do my best to see it through. And I just wanted to reiterate that promise to the people that elected me. I feel like open communication equals trust, and I want that to remain throughout my term. So I just wanted to put that out there. I just feel like there have always been policies in place to allow people to voice their concerns. Perhaps it hasn't been made clear to the people who are maybe unknown. I think sometimes that when people come to the board, they're at a level of frustration that they just don't know where to go and they don't know where to look. So I take that as my responsibility to educate my people. If they are frustrated and they need a place to turn, I want to guide them that way. It may not be to a board meeting to have a discussion in front of the board, because as we all know, our responsibilities are limited. The job of a board member is, to manage the business and the finances of the business, to oversee the policies and procedures and some of the academics and the construction and reconstruction of our facilities and the maintenance of that. So we have to keep in mind that the conversations at the board meetings need to fall within those reins. And other than that, we just need to be responsible and do our due diligence and point our people in the direction of those who can help them, if it's not a topic that we as a board can discuss. So I just wanted to make that known that, I'm open and I'm here. So I hope that, people don't see a barrier in contacting me or anyone else here on the school board. So thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Marion?
Yes, naturally.
Well, being one of the most seasoned board members, along with Mr. Duplantis right there, we have always had a policy in place and it's just about the exact same policy, where if a constituent or if a board member had an agenda item that they wanted to put forth,
it went to the president. Or sometimes the president sent that policy or board, excuse me, agenda item onto the committee that might have been the academics committee, or it might have been the policy or whatever, and it went there to see if it fit something that we could actually discuss. We, as you said, that, you know, Ms. Buffy, that everything, we're very limited as to what we can do. And so we're very limited, you know, when somebody wants to address the board, we have to be sure that it's something that we can do something about. We, you know, and this is not that much of a change. One thing when we decided, when we met before with the previous board to decide what we would do about the committees, we said, well, we'll try it without the advisory committee because we've gone down, we've lost these members, these 6 members. We'll try it, but if it doesn't work, then we're going to go back and we will reinstate it. And I think that this is the point that we've gotten to now. And it's not that we are reinstating a committee that wants to oversee and pull everything out that people are requesting to put on the agenda. It's just that the committee wants to be sure that it is something that we can address. If we can't, you know, if it's not within our realm, then there's no reason for us to sit there and discuss it and listen to it. And I've told so many people, and I know every board member has the same feeling. We are very committed to making our school system the best that it can be. We are very, you know, conscious about intrusion from other outside sources. We're on top of that. And we would never let anything happen if we don't, I mean, unless something sneaks into our classroom by a teacher, then that teacher will be right away will be called in and some action will be taken. So we can't guarantee you that we can't guarantee you that nothing like that would happen because you don't know when you're hiring people from all over the place, but know that we are on top of everything that our teacher, you know, that it's happening in our schools. And we would never let that intrusion come into here without somebody knowing it. And we have Jamie that's going to definitely let us know that if we see it. So I just wanted to add that this is not really that much of a policy change. It's always been in place. The only thing except just going to the board president, it is now going to the committee. And we do have a voice. We have the president, the vice president, and then somebody that's going to be elected here. Changing it every 6 months is just too much going on. So in 4 years term that we have, everybody will have a chance to serve on advisory because our president will be changed every year. Our vice president changed every year. And so this committee, the makeup of that committee will change. So that's my feelings about this. And we have a board attorney that tells us, you know, and advises us that we are definitely within the law of the things that we put into policy. So thank you very much.
So I have 2 things. In my introduction, I mentioned that it was historically the advisory committee. I have a copy of my handy dandy board member handbook. This was actually the old one that was printed out, the old copy from October of 2016. But I just want to read a section from you. It says the board president or committee chairperson, where appropriate, shall contact the board member requesting agenda items, blah, 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 to ensure the clarity, if the items are clear, and it says, to ensure that the matter is germane to the business of the committee of the board. This is just restating this and updating it to that of a non-member board. It is now not only given the board president the option to make that decision, but is given that decision power to the other 2 additional members on that committee. And then when we do, I'm going to allude to BBC, but when we do, we'll go to the next one, BCBD, when we look at the next one, if the committee deems that it is not appropriate to go to the agenda, you still have an option of getting it on an agenda with being contacted by 5 board members before the next meeting. So if it's something that people are passionate about, and people reach out in writing and say that they're passionate about this item, it can still be looked at on the committee agenda. So I just want to make sure that we clarified that it's not a tunnel. It's really not. There are different options. Thank you.
Jamie?
Ms. Marion said that they tried it. How many times did we try it? We've only had the public on the agenda, I believe, 1 time. So that's not fair to say we've tried it. Trying it means trying it several times to see if it's failed. And not just that, you guys had the foresight back in November to say, the 15th, that our rights as board members to put something on the agenda stayed. The new policy says, no, we have to go in front of this committee. But if we go in front of the advisory committee, like the handbook says, they can't deny it if it's germane. But this does not say that. So therefore, it can be denied, not once, but twice. So it's kind of like, I'm trying to understand what y'all are saying, because when we're reading it, it's not that way. And also to justify it, we can't sit here and say we tried something if we've only tried it once. That is not fair.
What I was talking about.
Hold on, whoa,
I'm so sorry. I'm
ma'am.
sorry. I'm out of order.
That was my response.
Oh, that's okay. Anyone else on the board would like to? Well, wait, I got you. No, but we want to do our process.
I'm a block this.
Joe, Mr. Joey.
Miss Marion did allude that I am one of the oldest board members here. Seasoned, board members here. I've been on the board, this is my 13th year. I do not recall ever, that I know of, blocking somebody that was a board member from putting any item on the agenda. Most of the committee meetings that I have attended in 12 years had very little public participation. Shame on y'all. I'm just letting you know how I feel. All right. Wow. I would love to see this room filled every committee meeting. I really would, and it would actually pleasure me to see the general public get involved. Some of you have been recently, and I thank y'all for that. But just to let you know, that's just how I feel. We're not stopping people from putting an agenda item. That's not what I'm reading. Mr. Pat would never let that happen, I can tell you that. And we go to him for his advice, and we pay him for that also, by the way. So I'm just saying that I don't think that I can recall, and let me tell you, this is how I'm feeling about this. We had one board member bring up the same agenda item probably 5 meetings in a row, 5 months in a row, when at one point we had pretty much decided once it's brought up, it's pretty much decided. Okay? Unless it was something that was close vote and it kept being brought up. Meeting after meeting after meeting, same discussion. And it was the 15 to 9. Yeah. Okay? It's Marion will tell you that.
That would be me.
No, it wasn't just you. There was a couple of them. And I kept voting no. Because I kept using the Y9. I like number 11. Nobody would never answer me Y9. So you see why I was, nobody opened their eyes to say, hey, why not 11? So it goes to show you. I kept saying, well, why 9? And everybody kept saying, why 11? How about 11? How about 13? Let's just slowly go down. Because what we were told once we went down, never ever can we go back up again. Number 9 is it. Or less. So that's just how I feel. But no, I don't ever recall we took a board member and we used to communicate a lot, just like this board does. Communication. I'll have an agenda item I'd like to bring forward. Remember, you need a second vote if you want to do something too. So always call out to your colleagues and get that second vote so that we can discuss it at a meeting. That's just my advice to any and all those board members. And thank y'all for letting me serve. District 5, Bayou Blue, Louisiana, God's country.
Any other board member? I think everybody spoke except me. But I will give you the floor, Miss Marion, now.
I just wanted to correct something that Jamie said. I didn't say that we had tried it with, I meant that we tried working without an advisory committee where we saw that we really needed it in instances. And I'm sure there's some other things that will come up that we will have to bring to advise, or I don't know if it's called advisory anymore if we change that policy. But anyway, that we bring it up to that. That's what I was talking about. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Yes, ma'am. I will allow you to, please, Ms. Jen.
BCBI clearly stated and defined how the public should behave when they are coming in here to speak. And that was a very good policy because it outlined how to speak, what to speak. You can't be in the public if the president doesn't bang the gavel and stop it. So therefore, you can't say that the public is all to blame when we've only tried it since the policy change happened in November. If the policy change happened in November and we're only in April, and had 2 people speak, it's not a fair assessment to say it doesn't work. And that's what I'm getting at. And furthermore, in the old policy, it clearly stated and gave that security to every member sitting on this board that we could put our agenda item up. It didn't make us say we all had to go through it. It was behind closed doors to make sure that we weren't putting up the clown car running down the street on the agenda. It was making sure it was to this room. So if I want to put social emotional learning on the agenda, it should be approved because that is something that's taught in this school district. And examples given to me in private by members of this board were to stop people from doing that. That is why I am standing up and saying no. We will not shut our board members down. We will not shut their voices down. And that is why I'm fighting hard on this. Not to say I don't like anybody. I think y'all great. Y'all bring something great to this board. But that's why. And that's why I'm going to trust what's in writing. I am not going to trust what you sit here and tell me is going to happen. I'm going to go off of what's put in writing because that's what's going to be used when I get told no.
Any other discussion? All right, I will entertain a motion to accept the revisions of policy BBC board member committees, option 2, as presented by Ms. Babbitt. All right, Ms. Wells and Ms. Bourgeois. And since we had all the discussions and all that fun stuff, we can go ahead and vote. All right, and moving down the agenda, I'm going to go ahead and read it as corrected. It would be to accept revisions to policy BCBD, agenda preparation and dissemination, option 2, as presented by Ms. Babbitt. And because it is a separate agenda item, we will open up for a comment. The public would like to comment at this time. I'm sorry?
Do you want me to introduce it first?
Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
So, item BCBD basically just cleaned up the verbiage from the item prior. We did change the name. We did not use the name as executive or ad hoc. So if you look through that, you will see that we struck out executive and ad hoc and changed the name to advisory consistently through the policy. Also, it says in the back, it was what I alluded to last time about the 5 advisory. If something is overruled, it can be requested in writing by 5 members to replace it on the agenda, which is what I spoke about last time. So this was a matter of just cleaning the policy and having it to be in line with the policy previously, BBC.
All right. Sir, please come on down.
John Toops again, 207 Orange Drive. So one of the issues that you heard was in trying to find out information about these agendas, you couldn't find it, didn't have clear thought. And so one of the things, again, you said, I heard you say, but you're very limited in what you can do. And if it's not meeting the definition of what you can do, we can't talk about it. Well, we the public, I don't know what you can or can't do. But after speaking with the DA, and speaking with judges, and speaking with the superintendent, everybody says they're controlled, and there's nothing they can do. So everybody says that. So we got the judges say we can't act, and we got the DA say I'm confined, and we got the superintendent says you don't know I'm in a straitjacket, and here we can't, we're very limited, we run a business. When all the time I thought you were the social conscience of the people, that you represent capacity to understand our culture and see that it's maintained in our school systems and that we can bring that to you. So I don't know that you can't do that. I don't know what the boundaries of it is, but we all know this country's broken. And then to go from the DA to your superintendent to what you can do, what the judges can do, and the legislative committees, it's really hard to understand how this government functions. So when if somebody wants to come to something, I guess we privately will find out where the roadblock is. So that's all I want to state, is that we don't know, I don't know what you can't control, but what it sounds like it's limited. And this is a business. It's not about policies that you can enact and influence. It's the buck's up there somewhere. And that's what I'm hearing everywhere. Everybody's got an excuse that the buck stops somewhere else. And here we are, the people, want to know, what can we do? We want to know what we can do to protect our culture, particularly this state, but this bayou. This is precious land to me. I got 2 camps, and I grew up shrimping and fishing, and I grew up with the people up and down the bayou, all the way from Golden Meadow, Lockport, La Rose. They were all family to me, all the way up here. And I'm trying to figure out what I can do as a citizen. And part of it is the next generation, which you influence. And so what's my role in that? I don't know. I don't know the boundaries that you have, but apparently pretty strict. So we'll see how it goes. We're going to be observing. We have more tools now to balance, to communicate what we don't like, what we like, and to rally people around things that are different. So we're going to encourage people, which you haven't seen before, to participate and to listen to people in a biblical sense. You're on the wall and you go to chauffeur and you bring the army. So, I mean, everybody here wants to do good and preserve our community. No more than we do. But everybody's a little nervous, particularly when we ranked 48th in the nation in education. You're not ranked 48th?
Second or 43rd? It just went up.
Oh, we did, because we got to correct Jeff Landry. He's on the internet right now saying
That's
we're
all
48.
That's all news.
He's saying we're 48, and that we have the highest expenditure per student in the South. So those are the reasons why people want to understand why it don't compute, because it's results oriented. So that's all. We don't know the boundaries. We'll find out what they are again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rod Soppy, 110 Bourgeois Street, Rayson, Louisiana, 70394. In the last policy, this committee recommended to the board to create an advisory committee. So that makes it 3 people get to decide. I'm going to read something in the policy in the first paragraph that says, remember now this policy talks about agenda preparation. It says, the items subject to approval by the president are the consent agenda, committee reports, and items sought placed on the agenda by the superintendent related to the routine business and preparation of the district. That means you now give the power of the presidency a supreme authority to pick what items they want on the agenda. With the 3, now this policy looks like it's taking it down to 1. Thank you. What it looks like.
Any other public? All right, open to board member discussion. Ms. Val?
I just want to say that when somebody has an agenda item that they want to submit, we're not trying to silence, as I understand it, the public or anybody. We're just trying to decide if it needs to become to a board meeting, or possibly does it need to go to a committee meeting, or sometimes just to a department within the district. We're not trying to silence anybody. We're just trying to see where exactly that agenda item needs to be held, that have the best result of it.
Done?
So I would like to remind everybody that the monthly meetings that we have are monthly business meetings. The purpose of the monthly meeting is to conduct the business of the district. And that's what we're trying to keep our meetings to. I would encourage everybody to have an open dialogue with your school board member. I have my constituents here, and I'll be honest with you, I have people from all up and down the valley that feel comfortable reaching out to me. And I always respond to everybody, and I always talk with everybody. Now, I am a teacher, which means that I'm in a classroom. And so if you call me at 8 o'clock on Tuesday, I guarantee you, you will not hear back from me until after 3 o'clock. However, I will return your call, or email, or whatever. And so when it's not about stopping communication, communication should be done on a one-on-one basis with your board member. So I would absolutely encourage you to do so. And in regards to your comment, Mr. Sapi, I'm going to take a second and I'm going to go ahead and just clarify something. The approval of the items is those items of business items. The consent agenda and committee reports should not have to be going through a committee. Those should be on the agenda every month like they should be. I mean, it's completely in line and legal. We have our attorney here. I'm sure he wouldn't mind speaking on that.
When I talked to Ms. Bavin about this issue, one of the things that we were trying to accomplish is to allow the agenda to flow like it always does. And the advisory committee would act only if we had a special request that was outside of the ordinary business of the board. Now, I know, that there's been and I have had some communications with Ms. Marlborough about this as well. And I said, look, there's going to be some issues where you may not agree, or the board members may not agree whether it should or shouldn't go onto an agenda. So it'd be important to have a stopgap measure. So if five board members thought it should be, they can request that it gets on the agenda. The other thing I'll remind you is that the advisory committee is just like this committee. So they would have an agenda to consider the agenda, or an agenda item, which would give everybody the opportunity to come and talk about it and tell these board members why they think it's an important piece of information that needs to be discussed, either at a committee, and then it would come to one of the standing committees, and then ultimately, if it's vetted and there's a recommendation, it would get to the full board. That is a very, believe it or not, democratic process, and it's one that the legislature uses. Because if you present a bill, everybody wants their bill passed, it gets assigned to a committee. And then the committee debates it as to whether or not it makes it to the House floor, the Senate floor, and then they have to vote on it, and then the governor can veto it. So this is kind of like a model that, we are, and it's part of the governance responsibilities and governance authority of this particular board and every other board that I've represented, and previous boards like this one and other boards that I represent that are school boards of the state. They do it pretty much the same way. The president sets the agenda. Ordinarily, this is actually a process that is a little bit more democratic in the sense that you have a committee, and it's not one person that will decide whether or not I'll say a not ordinary item gets requested that you wouldn't ordinarily consider. The superintendent knows what's going on a day-to-day basis, and he has business that he needs you to address, and it may be contracts, it may be various things that are important that he knows about. And what we didn't want to do is have the advisory committee stifle that. That would be something that the president could just approve pro forma. And that's how you have done business for the last, as long as I've represented you, over the last 30 years. So that was what part of the intention was. The other thing was you have only 9 board members now, and having the advisory committee meet every month to approve an agenda, I think the president thought that would be a bit onerous. If you didn't have to meet and there wasn't anything unusual and this was the ordinary business, then you wouldn't have to call it. So that was another part of the thought process when you and I spoke about it. When I looked at it, I also thought there were a couple of things that needed to be changed or at least approved. In the past, in years gone by with different boards, there was occasionally something that would come up where the standing committee, like Land and Facilities, has already met. And it might have been time sensitive, like we've approved, or we have to approve a contractor for a construction job, and we have to start the project or something along that lines. We gave the advisory committee the authority in this revision to address that when the standing committee could not address it till the next month and they weren't going to be called. There was a part of that policy that frankly, I didn't know existed when I read it, which was the stuff that we struck out at the end that gave the standing committee, various standing committees, the authority to act in emergency. And I thought that was overbroad. And that was my recommendation to the president. She said, well, change it and let's take a look at it. And what it said before is that in an emergency, a committee could act on behalf of the board. And what we did is strike that. And then what we said was the advisory committee, which would be made up of the president, vice president, and a third member elected, in the case of a declared state of emergency, which has a context in Louisiana because the governor issues a declaration of emergency. Then in that case, the advisory committee could act only in that occasion, and then only if all three committee members agreed, and then the board would have to ratify that at its next meeting. So that was a little bit more, I thought, a better process, and I recommend that to the board if you consider that language. And I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Not changing anything. This criteria, these bullet points, that it has to be within the jurisdictional, actionable jurisdiction of the board, that it can't interfere with an existing policy or process. It might be referred to a committee. Those things have been in policy for a long time. I can remember like 2 or 3 boards ago where we had a discussion like this, and that was all added. I think we didn't have any guidance, and the board wanted guidance. Okay, we want to know, and we want to communicate with the public when they could come and bring something to the board. And so I think this is just the same iteration of the same policy. We have now put it in the hands of an advisory committee that you folks can come and sit and view that committee when it's deciding these things. And obviously, I know these board members welcome the public to come and attend it, and they listen, and they have discussions about these kinds of things. So again, I want to reiterate to you, I think all of this is legitimate and legal. I thought Ms. Mulborough's changes, there were no problems with it in the sense that it wasn't illegal to do what she's suggesting. It's just what's the best way to do it. And there's a statute that vests these board members with powers. Mr. Toops, you said, I don't know the boundaries of it. Well, it's Title 17 of the revised statutes. It's the education statutes. And then it's all of the bulletins or regulations that are promulgated by BESE, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's another body of regulation. And so most of the policies that they pass and consider essentially are these statutes and regulations that have been decided by, the elected BESE members and your legislators. You ask, how do you change it? There is occasionally time when this board is asked by their association, the Louisiana School Boards Association, to send in resolutions against different things. And they do. And I help write them a lot of times where we think this is bad for education. And you have associations that work for you. The police departments have an association that do the same thing. Law enforcement. And so does Municipal Association and I think the Police Jury Association as well. And this school district is a member, obviously, of LSBA. So all of that is part of their voice. And they listen to you, and they act as collectively as school districts across the state. So I shudder when you say it's not democratic, because I think it's the essence of democracy, frankly, that these people vote on these things and consider these things. They have to have an agenda because that's their business, is to operate the school district as a business. The budget's a couple $100 million that they have to try and balance. And fortunately, and I guess I'm preaching right now, and I apologize for that. You guys are top 10 school district in the state. And I totally agree with you that we need to preserve our way of life down here. And they have managed to do that and still be quite an outstanding school district. And I have told them that, and I'm very proud that I've been representing them for all these years and have seen the progress that has been made by this district. It's remarkable. So I know there's a lot of negativity that I hear out there, and I frankly don't understand it. And I apologize for that, but I want to understand it. But I also want you to know that we work really hard to communicate and to do the things. And I can only say that they ask me, they demand that of me as their lawyer to do those kinds of things. So with that said, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malvin.
Any other? Right, and I will just kind of clean up my view is that the advisory committee would meet in public. So that, as Mr. Amity stated, there would be an agenda. Everyone would be welcome to attend those meetings. Though those meetings may not be needed from time to time, but obviously if you have an agenda request that's being considered at that, I believe that everyone would have the opportunity to give background on as to why it's important and where it fits in. The other thing that this does, it truly, instead of just leaves it out there for where it needs to be pertinent to within our purview and stuff like that, it creates for you, the public, for us as board members, a checklist to say, do I have this covered? What's my expectation? I need to obviously create a presentation. I need to be able to have all that information available so that it can be truly evaluated and to make sure. And again, that's what I think was not visible before, and now it is visible now. And I think my vision has always been to provide this opportunity for the public to be able to read it, see it, meet the expectations so outside agenda items can make it. And again, it may not always be something that we can act on, but we may feel it's important that there is a report given. And I believe we've already allowed that opportunity since the start of this year to do that. And again, it's my position. And again, I'm acting as policy procedure person. We're about to transition to academics, but I believe as long as I'm in this position, I want to give everybody an opportunity to have a report or a voice in those types of things. So, we have a first and second for agenda item. I'll read it again. To accept revisions to the policy BCBD, agenda preparation and dissemination, option 2 as presented by Ms. Tina Babbitt. So let's go ahead and vote. All right, and motion carries. And the last one, to approve revisions to policy BCBI, public participation, as presented. The only big change, or the change that's there, is that the criteria to get on the agenda is now in the agenda preparation policy. So that's what was relocated. Instead of it just changing automatically, obviously we want to go ahead and establish a vote on those changes. Because again, it fits better. That's the explanation. We'll go ahead and open it to the public for comment. Yes, sir.
Ron Sapier, 110 Bourgeois Street, Rayson, Louisiana, 70394. Good, since you seem to be so open, since you're the president, if I have any questions, I'll just go straight with you.
No problem.
Great. I want to talk first a statement broadly about public participation. And that is when the agenda, these documents, these policies get posted on board docs. Yesterday afternoon, yes, it must have been sometime between 4:30, it got posted for the public to see, because I kept waiting and refreshing it. And that's public participation. Is these people, plus including myself, would never be here if I wasn't waiting every time I knew that there was a board meeting, for the agenda to come out and see what's on it, so I can comment up here. Because it looks like the only way I can comment is if it's on the agenda. So I don't know how y'all can go about it under the parish council. Their meetings are on Tuesdays. That the whole packet and document of about 300 pages already open to the public on their website by the end of the business day on Thursday. You have the whole weekend to look at it. So I just hope y'all would look into to try to put the documents on board documents maybe a little faster, because I think if you do that, you can have a room filled here with people. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My comment is the same comment about that. In trying to encourage local participation, I was successful in getting the Thibodeau City Council to be able to post agendas on the meetings on Tuesday, and they publish them on Thursday at the latest Friday. So they publish them in advance when they didn't do it. Plus they have an opt-in where you could go and request to automatically get an email. So this is a $200 million plus business, and you got 24 hours to post it, and which means 6 o'clock before 6 o'clock. And so my request is also the same, and I'm doing some inquiry right now. I called the Lafayette School Board, and they put it on Friday for their Wednesday meeting. So I'm doing a survey of all the local school boards of when they post their agendas and supplementary data. So I want to know where you compare with your local constituents and what they're doing. Because I think it's really tough for somebody to have to wait till 4 in the evening to get it, and then have a busy day and then come here. So if there's a way to schedule your business so we can understand it a little bit ahead of time, just to know. Because it's easy enough to read an agenda to see if I want to go talk about it or I don't. Because we have to, I'm personally concerned about the library board, city council, levy district. So I got to go look at this website, and that website, and that website, and this website, and legislative. It's very hard to participate. But if it comes to me, and I just say, yep, this is interesting, let me talk about it. It would work for me. So you may not have the technology today, but the city didn't, but the mayor made a commitment that any public meeting he's going to have, he is going to provide an access in that you can request and opt in to get that agenda through a simple piece of software. I would suggest you take a look at that, and also look at providing a longer time span if possible. I mean, you're meeting once a month, and if y'all could get that done on a Friday before your meetings, it would help the public to be able to disseminate it. And again, I'll get back to you. I'll let you know the results of my survey. My first call was Lafayette because I met somebody running the school board, and I was able to question him at the legislature yesterday. So he gave me what they would do. So if one can do it, what are your constituents doing? I don't know. So that's the only comment I have about that. So it's two comments. One, if you could extend the time at least another day, and then if you could use the software that's available, what we could opt in, as I'm going to try to get the parish government, levy district, all of the other places to make it easy for the citizens to look and pay attention. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. Any other public? Yes, ma'am. I gave you a pass, Mr. Toops. I didn't make you introduce yourself, but I'm just saying.
Well, maybe I would want another face.
That's all right. We hear you. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Debbie Melvin, 322 Cedar Tree Drive in Thibodeau. I'm listening to the process, and I've read the documents and that kind of thing. But I'm sitting there thinking about like concerns that we have. That you guys may say, well, our hands are tied. We can't do anything about that. That's not within our jurisdiction or whatever. And what I'm thinking of is the things that we may have to stand up against. And I'm just not sure that we're going to be able to hide under that thing of we can't go there because our hands are tied. We can't do anything about it. And I'm thinking specifically about things that are coming from the Department of Education on the federal level which is something we wanted to talk to y'all about that we just found out about and didn't make to get on this agenda because we did not even find out a week ahead of time. But when those kinds of things happen and we go to you and we request that, you know, we sit before or stand before a committee meeting and we say, you know, this is coming down from the federal government. And we're concerned. We don't want that happening here. And I think I've said that to you before, that we read about all these things that are happening around the country, and it concerns us, and we don't want those things to come here. I like all of y'all. I find that I can talk to everybody here. I can. But collectively, if there's something that's happening, and I always honor Ray Bernard when I say, I can't ask a question, because that's what he used to say, Debbie, you can't ask a question. But I just, you know, I do ask a question because I give you something to think about. But what will you do? What will you do? If there's something coming down that is going to affect our children, and I know y'all didn't run for this office for any other reason except that you care about our kids and you care about what's happening in the school system. We all are on that same page. But when it comes down to it, if there's something that comes and we know about it and we want you to know about it, we want to make sure you know about it. And we want to know, what are we going to do? We're partners with y'all. We said that from the get-go. We, the people who is trying to stay on top of these things, we want to partner with y'all. We don't want to make y'all mad. We don't make, you know, we don't want to call names. We're not like that. What we want to be, though, is somebody that will have your ear. And if there's something that concerns us, we want to be able to speak up. Meeting, you know, whether it's, and I know exactly what you're saying, Tina, because when I first started coming to the school board meetings, it was like, golly, that's so business. You know, they don't discuss anything, they just vote, and it's like it's decided ahead of time. And what is BCBD? You know, I mean, did not have those questions, Marion, you know, so the general public that sees that, that's the business meeting, but we find our place here in the committee meetings, and we appreciate every time that y'all listen to us. But I just want us to stay focused on what are we going to do, because there's something coming down right now that we're going to need to act on, and it's not going to be pretty, you know. And I know when y'all see it, y'all are going to go, but are your hands tied? Do you feel like that your hands are tied and that you can't speak out? It takes a lot of guts to get up and speak out publicly against something. So, you know, what are we going to do? Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Sharon Nalcant, 623 Fairway Drive. I'm a retired school teacher, Bayou Blue. I taught Bayou Blue. I actually taught your superintendent many years ago. I love teaching. I have 16 grandkids and 1 great, and I worry so much about what they're going to be taught in school these days, and the other teachers. I mean, the other children. So I think the main thing I want to say is we want to trust. As a school teacher, as a parent and a grandparent, we want to put our trust in what you're going to do with our school system. And I didn't realize they were, you said they were up there in the 3rd? Is that what you said? I am so happy that just impresses me a lot, because I've been out of the system about 19 years now. But with We the People, we've come back to kind of just want to kind of take a look over what's going on. And so far, you know, except for knowing what's on the agenda and what they've said. I've been pleased what I've seen, but there's so much that's coming down from the federal government. Hopefully that will be changed before, but that we just can't allow our children, our innocent children, to be burdened with all of that. So we just want to, I just want to be able to trust what you do. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, board members, any comments on the last policy clear? All right, since none, we'll go ahead and vote. Can we have a first and second? You got it?
I'll move that.
Oh, yes, get a first and a second. Put them in a different order this time.
Yes.
Ms. Bourgeois and Ms. Wells. All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, and it carries. Moving on to item 3, academics, staff updates, supervisory staff updates. We'll do an elementary education, Ms. Hodson.
All right, thank you very much. So, first of all, I'd just like to say I'm so proud to work in this district. We do such phenomenal work, and oftentimes our teachers aren't recognized for that. So, what we've been working on the last month is providing professional development to our teachers in ELA using our CKLA. If you watch the news the last few weeks, you know that Kim Mulkey and the Lady Tigers won the national championship. And I sort of began the professional development with teachers with this analogy. When Kim Mulkey got to the national championship game, she didn't show up just to play the game. There was a lot of work that went way before she got on the court to play. And so when we decided to do this professional development, my thought was, how do we build teacher capacity to really develop strong lessons? So when we go to deliver those lessons, we'll be really well prepared. So the theme of this particular professional development was CKLA internalization sessions and internalizations of lessons. And so our curriculum specialist, Ms. Elaine Jean-Frion, who works probably 24/7, spearheaded this project and also had the help of our coaches that also serve in the capacity at different schools. So they led this professional development. And I've always believed that in Lafourche, often people seek out professional development from outside. But what we have inside our own district is sometimes better than with all those companies provide, because they want to sell you products. We know we've used this series for 2 years, so we were familiar with it, and so we are proud that we have been able to provide professional development so far for 103 teachers, and that also includes some principals and assistant principals as well. We did a survey. 90% of our teachers who left that professional development opportunity gave the session a 5, which was our highest rating. And I'll just share just a few of the things that the teachers said were takeaways from the professional development. My biggest takeaway is that there's always something more that you can learn. Working with your peers and digging into curriculum will make for more effective teaching. The importance of planning and being intentional with enhancing student achievement. I enjoyed internalizing the lesson and digging deeper to ensure our lessons and instructions are more intentional. How to plan using information from NEAT, which is our evaluation tool, primary focus standards, and putting them all together to implement the lessons. Learning how to use all parts of my lessons. It also helped me to see just how much CK aligns to the state standards. And so this is just really a small sample of the overwhelmingly positive feedback we received from our teachers and leaders. So we've finished the first part of that, which is the K2 part, after testing. State testing begins next week and for the next 2 weeks. After that, when we return, we'll do a session targeted to our 3rd and 5th grade teachers. In addition to that, Eureka Squared will be a new math curriculum. It's sort of like we were using before, but it's a more improved version. Our math assessment teams will begin unit studies in May, and then we'll be revising our assessments for the summer. In addition, I didn't really plan for this, but today, I don't know, a couple of the board members were invited to a Knowledge Matters tour at Lockford Upper. A few of our board members had attended along with a lot of other people. And their motto is to find the good and praise it. And this is a national company, a nonprofit that came in and really highlighted the good work that our district is doing. And as part of that, when they leave, they ask someone to do an opinion piece or a blog on what that looked like. And so the tour was about high quality science materials. And so unfortunately, they asked me to do it. And I am not a professional writer by any means. I mean, I am just a simple Bayou girl, born, raised, lived here my whole entire life. And so I tried to do the best I could and really deliver to them what they wanted. And so yesterday it was published in a blog, and I'm really proud of the work, but I want to acknowledge the work of the teachers that do so much of the day-to-day things. And so I'll share it. I'm not going to read it to you for sure. You can do that on your own. But my last paragraph, and it just is real simple. It just says that, I'm going to read it. It'll be real quick, I promise. Our journey is far from complete. There's still so much work to be done here in Lafourche Parish Schools. But we know we have laid the groundwork for future success with the help of high-quality science curriculum. None of this could be done without the dedication of our classroom teachers and support from our families and community. The biggest winners in all of this are our students, the single reason we exist. We are definitely in this to win this for them. So I'll just leave you with that, and those are my updates. So thank y'all.
Secondary, Mr. Delton.
Okay, so we in grades 3 through 8, which includes some Wisconsin schools, the LEAP test is going to start next week. So that'll be happening in those grade levels. At the high school level, they will also be doing a lot of LEAP testing. The last few years with our high schools doing LEAP testing, we've actually transitioned to a few days of virtual. Through grades 3 through 8, LEAP testing is easier because every single kid is taking English, Math, Science, and Social Studies all at the same time. In high school, it's much more varied and much more difficult to manage testing. So we have begun allowing the high schools to transition to virtual for some of their grade levels of students who are not involved in testing, because frequently you would think, well, it's half the school tested, you just need half the teachers, which is really not true. So it allows the high schools to manage that testing securely and properly, while also not holding up those other kids that are not involved in LEAP testing. So that's all going to take place next week. Before we're going to meet again in committee, just wanted to remind everybody that we are moving into graduation season. May 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th are going to be our graduation ceremonies. The 16th is Central Lafourche at 7 p.m. The next night, the 17th, is Thibodaux High at 6. And both Central and Thibodaux take place at the Civic Center. May 18th is South Lafourche at 7 o'clock p.m. And the Friday, which is May 19th, is always Vow at 6 p.m. And that one takes place at Thibodaux High School. So those are coming up in the near future. Thibodaux Middle School is moving along fine. I was in there yesterday with Miss Depositary. The building is looking great. I was excited yesterday. I'm seeing paint. I'm seeing floors in some of the rooms. Some of them are not there yet, of course, but you're starting to see it come together, and it's going to be a beautiful facility. Miss Tobias has worked with 2 moving companies. They're staged. We talked about boxes. We talked about color coding hallways. We're starting to have conversations about what that big move is going to look like. And of course, I've been working very closely with Miss Young, the new principal, to just make sure that all of the little things that need to be considered in opening a brand new school is going to be in place for next August. So that's very exciting. The reason I'm sitting in this seat, taking roll, is Mr. Martin is actually in Baton Rouge tonight. We have 2 students, and this is the first time that I'm aware that this has ever happened. We've got 2 students. One is Kate Claymore from Thibodeau High School. The other is Blakely Falgout at Lockport Middle School. They're both finalists for State Student of the Year. It's all of those kids, when you get to those levels, are just absolutely amazing kids. And the level of competition is so difficult to choose winners and, you know, from everyone else, because they're all just wonderful students. So to have 1 finalist is great. We have 2. It's fantastic. And while we were sitting here, I kind of dipped down at my phone. I wasn't texting my wife or anything. I actually just got a text message that Blakely Falgout won the state. So that's Blakely Falgout from Lockport Middle School, the state winner. Yeah, that's my update.
Thank you so much. Positive news. All right, federal programs, Ms. Ankalai.
I don't know how to follow that. Federal report. So the Super App grant application has been approved by the State Department. Yay. In that application, we requested competitive funding under the following sections. So we're going to receive grant awards for quality teaching and learning, effective educator workforce, and systems, structures, and partnerships. So the Bessie Board is meeting this week to approve the recommended grant awards for LEAs. So that's great news for Lafourche. A monitoring update. Lafourche participated in 2nd quarter monitoring via the State Department for the following federal programs. So we were monitored for Title I, Title II, Title IV, McKinney-Vento ARP1, McKinney-Vento ARP2. So 5 huge monitoring events. The LDOE determined that all activities were in compliance with established programmatic regulations and requirements. Yay. So that's what I get paid to do, right? So I'll get a paycheck soon. Not a bonus, just my regular okay. Next, McKinney-Vento grant. So we have to write a 3-year McKinney-Vento competitive grant to get funding for that program. So if we don't receive this grant award every 3 years, it's an unfunded mandate, meaning that we still have to provide services to those students who qualify, but it would be at our cost. So this is very, very important because it's costly. So we wrote that, we submitted that, and we are awaiting award notification. So y'all keep y'all fingers crossed. Micro Center classes. So as you know, we are on track to open 3 Micro Center classes for 3-year-old children starting in August, partnering with a Type 3 child care center in our network. They are Little Arrows Learning Academy. So 1 class will be opened at Chack Bay Elementary School and 2 at Raceland Lower. We're on track to open these in August pending Board of Health and licensing inspections. So that's been quite a process, but keep your fingers crossed for that too, because that's good news to service our littles, right? And lastly, pre-K registration, that's ongoing. We currently now have 4 schools that have waiting lists. Those schools are North LaRose, Golden Meadow Lower, St. Charles Elementary School, and Bayou Buff Elementary School. We will be doing pre-K screening in June, And parents will be notified as soon as possible, early July, because they need to know if their kid gets in or not, right? So that's federal.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And, yes, ma'am?
No, I wanted to ask her about the pre-K. You take the lowest scores, right? From the lowest.
So there's a ranking.
A ranking.
All right, thank you, ma'am. And, child welfare and attendance, Mr. Cook.
Get to close the show again.
Close it up.
I don't have as much good news for everybody before me, but my job doesn't really deal with too many good news things. Open up with District Attorney Truancy Enforcement Program, our DATE program. We had our final meetings for DATE. In April of this year, we shut it down right before testing. For those who don't know, that's when we take the students who miss excessive days, we bring them in before the District Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Office, FINS, and ourselves, and we discuss how we can be proactive in helping get these students back in school. This year, we've had about an 85 to 95% parental involvement rate, which is great. Although a lot of those kids were not charged, which, I mean, I'm not really in favor of charging a lot of those students. Some of the parents do, I feel like they should, but we try to work with them because a lot of times this year, especially this year, we've had cases where they weren't your normal, I'm just skipping school type of cases. They were, my home is gone. I'm living here with these people and we're struggling with the buses. And Toby, shout out to Mr. Hubbard, he's doing a great job of getting a lot of these kids who are living wherever, just trying to get them to school. So with that, with the high amount of parental involvement we had, they got together, we got to get those services for a lot of families. We hopefully improved a lot of scores and got those kids back in schools and got the instructional time back. So that's what we did with that. PASS, our PASS site right now is currently full. They're all full, but we redesigned, Mr. Fields redesigned a method to get more student service through the program. Again, now for those who don't know what PASS is, that's when students have discipline issues throughout the school year. We want to still have them. Prior days when a child was expelled, they found themselves in trouble. They were put out of school, they wouldn't have opportunity to get their academics. But now in the Foosh Parish, we work so diligently to get those kids, even though they're struggling behaviorally, we still want them to stay pace with their peers because they're going to go back. And hopefully they learn their lesson, and they get the counseling or help they need there, and they get back into the school system. We don't want them to fall behind. So right now we're working a new program where we service younger kids earlier and older kids later, or vice versa. I don't want to misspeak on that. But everyone gets service, then we still give them those minutes, because a lot of those kids need accommodations, where we also have those accommodations there for them to be able to service more kids with a smaller facility. We're looking at a new facility now, trying to figure out where we're going to move past with the destruction of the old schools over there. Hearings this month, we've had 77 hearings between February and March. As of today, this month we've had 26, which is down some. Again, a lot of those hearings that we're saying, it seems like a lot of them are habitual violations. So these are infractions that occur from the beginning of school till now. And then finally reach the point where they, you've done enough, you've got to be dealt with in that manner. PBIS this year, we piloted electronic PBIS TFI LED inventories. The reason for that is that we want to give schools the opportunity to look at their PBIS programs throughout the school year, not just once a year earlier before the set observations. So now we can do them electronically. They can get with me. I shared information with them. They can meet with their leadership teams and evaluate their programs throughout the year so they can improve and reach out and reward those students who are doing the positive things, which again, will keep the referrals down, keep the expulsions down, and increase instructional time. Final thing, code of conduct, pre-progression plans. Meetings are scheduled for tentatively this summer. We're still waiting for the legislation to come through. That's going to have a lot to do with how we affect certain things and have to put them in place in a template for the PPP plan. That's it for child welfare and attention.
All right, thank you so much, sir. In closing, I want to thank everyone's patience while we work through these policies and the agenda of today's meeting. You are appreciated. Thank you.